I'm curious to know what advice you have for young people as they think about their career development.
Oh, I could talk about this forever. My biggest piece of advice for young people is to not get so rigid in not knowing what it's going to look like. I think young people, in my experience right now, are really fixated on like, but what if, what if I take the wrong job, or what if I don't have a job that's good enough, or well, what if I take this and then I don't take that? Like, stop worrying about the existential so much. Just take a job. Like your first job, it really doesn't matter. Maybe you're lucky in that your first job is amazing and it's everything you ever wanted, and blah, like insanely great. More likely, your first job, you're not going to be great at it because it's your first job, and it's not going to be great, and it's not 20 years, 30 years, 10 years ahead. You're not going to be like, oh, I loved that job. But really stop worrying about the existentialness of that first job and just take a job and learn as much as you can.
And don't you think that there are many young people who feel like there's this roadmap and I have to stay on this, and if I deviate from it, then I'm never going to recover?
Yes, I mean, that's why I called this book Nobody Cares About Your Career, which is that you have to stop. You don't have to do anything, actually. Let me take that back. But there's this notion that you should be doing something a certain way, or you should be on a certain track, or you should be making this much money or have this type of title. And it's really a false narrative, and it's really damaging because it puts you losing on a yardstick that really is irrelevant and doesn't matter. People do not care about your career. Like your mother might care a little bit, but really she doesn't even care. So I think what's hard about this notion that you should be something is I think all that serves to do is to make that little voice inside of you about what you really want to do or who you really want to become. It makes that voice feel small. Like I have a friend who's a college senior at Princeton, and I was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do after you graduate from Princeton?" And he's like, "Well, I think I have to go into finance." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because that's what you're supposed to do when you go to Princeton." And I'm like, "Well, is that what you want to do?" And so I think just doing things that interest you, that excite you, that make you feel fulfilled, it's really important. And getting yourself out of this "you should be" thing is a good way to get there.
That takes risk. And I wanted to ask you about what you've learned about risk and failure, because you have taken risks, at
Yes,
least from the outside. I don't know you personally, but I have seen that you didn't choose the path that was the least of least
definitely.
resistance.
Yeah. Um, I have I really listen to that voice inside of me, and I've taken made a bunch of moves in my career that I would say conventional wisdom would say you shouldn't do that, or that wasn't a good move. And what I knew inside was that it was the right move for me. And that's also why I call the book Nobody Cares, is that you are the person who you are waiting for. Like you are the person who is going to propel you into a new place. And taking risk is a really, really important part of that, because you may lose, and you'll probably lose as much as you win, but the effort and the exertion to go through that is where you learn the most. When I worked at Fidelity Investments, I worked in the legal department, and I was making $50,000 a year. I was probably 22. And that was a big gig. And like, that was a lot of money. I still think $50,000 is a lot of money. And I left it to go make $17,000 and work in the advertising department. And everyone was like, "You are an idiot." And, were there things I should have done differently in that transition? Like figure out how to make $50,000 and then live on $17,000? 1000%. But what it taught me was that a risk could open up a whole new world, and I really do believe that about taking risk. I tend to believe that everyone is an optimist, or most everyone is an optimist. So even if you did the stupidest risk ever and it turned out to be a mistake, you're going to say, "Oh, but if I hadn't done this, this really good thing wouldn't have happened." So this fear around risk taking, I think it's almost, it's just it's time not well spent.
As we were talking here, I'm realizing that it was 30 years ago this month that I sold all my possessions and moved one way to Germany.
Huh.
And I will say that that year that I spent in Germany has really was set the foundation for the past 30 years of my life
Yep.
and my career being an entrepreneur. This is my fifth company.
Yep.
And without taking that risk, who knows what
Yeah, you wouldn't
life would have
probably
turned
be
out.
the same
No,
person.
absolutely not.
And that's what's great about taking risk is that it makes you learn a lot about yourself in a really short amount of time because you've put yourself in an unsafe position. And, I have this line, I talk about it a lot. I talk about it in the book, which is like, get uncomfortable being uncomfortable. How do you become uncomfortable in an uncomfortable situation? That's learning how to take risks.
By the way, I was working for a Fortune 500 when I moved to Germany, and my parents were like, "Are you out of your mind?" And so
Exactly.
I'm wondering what people said to you when you left this
Oh, yeah.
$50,000 a year job to make $17,000.
Yeah, people, I mean, the HR lady was like, "What?" Like, no one in the history of Fidelity had done that. Probably no one has done that since. There was a lot of like, "Are you sure?" And at the end of the day, like, I actually didn't really care so much what everyone else said because I was convinced and convicted that it was right for me, and that that was true when I took the Barstool Sports job, which is most people said that was career suicide, and the reality is it was the exact opposite. I think it was the single greatest thing that ever happened to my career. But I would never have known if I hadn't tried. And the fact that people thought it was a mistake actually made me double down on wanting to make sure it was successful. So it also, taking a risk and having that be an unpopular choice can be a great motivator.